Here's a fun fact I bet you didn't know. The average podcast never makes it past 10 episodes. Yeah, it's true. Past 10 episodes. And I believe that's because the average podcaster is only consumed with cool cover art and buying the best mic. They think it's all about the technical stuff, but they forget that you need to be intentional about who your audience is, how you're going to serve them, and so much more. My success with the Redefining Wealth podcast has come from being extremely strategic and extremely intentional. And for the first time ever, I'm pulling back the black curtain so I can share with you what's going on behind the scenes to make this podcast what it is. If you have been thinking about launching a podcast, or you've launched a podcast, but it's not quite getting the traction that you desire, I invite you to join me for Podcast with Purpose, where I am going to share with you what I have done strategically and intentionally to make the Redefining Wealth podcast what it is today. For the first time ever, I'm sharing deep details, resources. Anything that I can share that will make your journey to amplifying your voice in this space easier, I'm willing to do it. So join me. Go to podcastwithpatrice.com. That's podcastwithpatrice.com for more details. I am so excited to help you launch your podcast with purpose.
Start taking a break, taking a Sabbath, like actually learning and understanding what the Sabbath means and how it's for our benefit.
You're listening to the Redefining Wealth podcast with Patrice Washington. In today's episode, we sit down with Certified Educator in Personal Finance, Bob Lotich. He's here to demonstrate the joy and generosity. Hey there, this is Patrice Washington from patricewashington.com, where we chase purpose, not money. Welcome back to another episode of Redefining Wealth. This is actually our third and final episode in the Money Masters series. If you're just joining us, go back and check out our episodes with Anthony O'Neill and Lynn Richardson. And now we're here with Bob Lotich. So excited to jump into today's interview. Listen, if you're brand spanking new, here's what you need to know about Redefining Wealth. We are a community that believes wholeheartedly that wealth is so much more than just money and material possessions. We believe deep down in our hearts in the original 12th century definition of wealth, which says it's about the condition of well-being. And so every week we seek to unpack what I call the 6 pillars of wealth. These are the different areas of life that impact how we see our finances, how we manage our finances, but they're also the areas we don't always think about. So if you need to get familiarized with these 6 pillars of wealth, I want you to go to patricewashington.com/start here. That's patricewashington.com/start here. Now, this has been our Money Mastery series, and I did an episode a long time ago talking about abundance being activated by giving. And I'm really excited to jump into this episode about generosity because I truly see being generous as a wealthy habit. And I couldn't think of anyone better to illustrate this lesson than Bob Lotich. Bob is a certified educator in personal finance and founder of the award-winning website seedtime.com. His site and podcast contain the lessons learned from his journey from being a stingy, debt-ridden fool to being 100% debt-free, being able to give more than he ever dreamed, and the joy with money in the process. Bob's writing and advice has been featured in Kiplinger's, Yahoo Finance, Forbes, and so many others. Without further ado, here's my buddy, Bob Lotich. Welcome to the Redefining Wealth podcast, Bob.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you, Patrice.
I'm glad to have you. This has been a long time coming.
Like I was telling you before, I was always wanting to reach out and meet you, and we've crossed paths, but just not had that chance yet. So I'm super excited that we get to now.
I'm so glad that you circled back because I actually, like you said, have wanted to cross paths. I know I saw you years ago at FinCon, and saw you at that Dave Ramsey influencer event, but we never quite got together there either. Yeah. And I actually ran across, I've been following you on Instagram for some time though, you and your beautiful wife, Linda. And I ran across a video where you guys talked about paying your house off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I immediately, like a good wife does, DM'd it to my husband. I was like, see, look at what's possible, right? But just always been inspired by your work and how you tie in biblical principles. I know I've run across your articles for years. And so I really want to get in to this episode by really unpacking how you describe yourself. So in your bio, you talk about being a once stingy, debt-ridden fool. How do you describe or define the word stingy? What did that look like for you?
For me, it was just all focused on self. I think that's what it comes down to. I just didn't have any joy in giving. I didn't have any joy in generosity, and everything was about me. I mean, one of my earliest memories is of my little sister, who's 3.5 years younger than me. And I was probably 8 or 9 at the time. I think she was 5 or so. I remember telling her, I'm going to be rich one day, because we grew up pretty middle class, not at all wealthy by any stretch of imagination, but it was an aspiration that I had even from such a young age. And I'm like, I want to be rich one day. And I'm going to have this big old mansion. I'm going to have a tennis court inside. I'm going to have a pool inside, all this stuff. And I said, and you can't come in, just like a nice, normal, mean big brother. And so that was like always on my mind, like money. But it's just interesting how my heart was not right. And it was too, like you talk about, like I was chasing money. I was not chasing purpose. And I was just completely headed down the wrong path, chasing money for a long time. And that was part of what I was kind of describing as just being stingy.
So how do you think that shows up for a lot of people, though? I love Andy Stanley's How to Be Rich. I don't know if you read that book. We read it in Patrice's Pod Club. And it talks about the fact that many of us don't give to the extent that we could because we don't realize we're already rich. Yeah. And rich is not,
so true.
Right? Rich is not, I make $500,000 and above per year. So like, especially in America, we're in the top 4% of income earners in the world. And yet we still never feel like we have enough to give, right? So do you think that other people might be stingy and not even recognize it? Like, did you know I'm being stingy?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that's really easy to spot in other people, but so hard to spot in ourselves. My relationship with the Lord over the years, He just keeps bringing me to deeper and deeper levels of just shining a spotlight on things. It's like, I didn't know that was there, I think it's something that if we're all honest, I think there's always an amount that at least most of us are dealing with to some extent. And I think just being open and honest about it and being okay, like greed is something that a lot of us have to deal with. I mean, probably, I don't know if I can say everybody, but it's just such a common pervasive thing that just being honest about the fact that it's there, I think is helpful to acknowledge it and move past it and work through it,
Yeah. I think because too, we live in a society in particular where it's always about getting bigger and better and going for more and more and more. And we really struggle with contentment. Like when is enough enough? Right? Because if you get to the place of understanding what's enough for you, even before then, you can really be a great giver. But when you understand what's enough, right, then it's nothing to kind of go above and beyond and give. And I know that you and your wife are significant tithers. You guys have a really interesting concept for how you tithe, if I remember correctly. Can you talk about your belief in tithing and how you actually got from stingy to being such a great giver?
Yeah, it's been a journey for us, for sure. And now we always had even from when we were dating, Linda and I both had a passion. We wanted to be able to give on a large scale. We wanted to be able to give away a lot of money. We didn't know how to get there. So that was like something that had changed in my heart over those years, just kind of walking with the Lord and letting him do some work on me. But by the time we were engaged, that was something we were excited about, but we still didn't know what that meant. And we didn't know what kind of sacrifices would be, what things we would need to give up in order to make that happen. And so for us, it just began with tithing. Like she had been tithing from as a little girl, and that was just a big part of her growing up. She was raised a Christian. I wasn't, but as a teenager became one. and kind of discovered tithing or started kind of seriously to doing it probably in my early 20s. And I just watched God start doing stuff. And it just started to make sense that, all right, this is working a little bit. And as we kind of started moving forward, we just noticed that we had more financial peace as a whole in our lives. We noticed that even though we're giving away 10% of our income, things are just really solid. Like things feel good. And it was just so much better than when we were keeping all of it, or when I was keeping all of it. And as we just kind of continued down this journey, we just felt like the Lord just continued to stretch us in our giving more and more and more. And the big kicker moment for us a little bit was, I guess that was 2011 or so. I was out praying one day and praying about some financial things we were going through, and a couple like struggles and kind of bumps in the road we had hit. And I just kind of felt like the Lord kind of dropped in my heart. If you really want to see me move on your finances, I want you to give your age as a percentage of your income. And I remember thinking like, what?
Did I hear that right?
Am I for real? Like, and I was 31 at the time, like that's more than double what we're given. And I went back home and ran the numbers and like, can we even do this? And wasn't even sure. But it was one of those times where it's like, and I didn't hear an audible voice, but I just sensed that this was what he was leading me to do. And, and that's a unique thing. It's not for everybody, but it's something that I just felt him leading us to do. And whenever I kind of see God kind of drop this question in front of me, I know that there's something good on the other side of it. Like, I know that he's not asking me to do it just to torture me,
Right.
There's a reason behind this. And so I talked to Linda, and she's been so good about this. She's so generous and just so willing to just go on these adventures like this. And so she was on board completely. And so like, all right, let's go for it. Let's do it. And even though like this seems like this is the opposite of kind of what I was praying about. I was praying about moving forward financially. And it's like God said, oh, I want you to give a whole bunch more away. So we did it and we began doing it. And you know what? Within that year, we paid off our house. Like it made no sense. It defied all logic and reason. And that was kind of the first big thing where it's like, all right, I'm really starting to believe that we cannot outgive God. Like, we've heard that phrase, but once you start kind of stretching in that, and it's like, I just don't think there's any limits here, And so that's kind of, we've been walking that journey the last 9 years by his grace. He's provided enough for us to be able to do it, which is amazing. And
Okay, Bob, we have so many questions. I know I can see the comments on YouTube now where people are like, but how? First of all, my theme for this year is obedience. When I feel the Holy Spirit give me direction, I've been learning not to question, not to have that back and forth and like, but God, are you sure? Because that was my norm, right? Like, but are you sure? Or maybe I heard this wrong. Let me pray a little bit more, right? What was the time frame between you having this divine download and actually going into action? Like how much time passed?
I don't remember specifically for that, but I mean, I 100% understand what you're saying. Like there are so many times, that's one area in my life I want to grow in as well. Like how do I quickly obey when God asks me to do something? And it's scary. Like there's no qualms about it. And I think there are some people who it's like, just jump off a cliff, like with nothing. But the more of these things we go through, the more I can be like, God, all right, you came through on this. You came through on this thing. You came through on this thing. Like you just keep showing up every single time. Like you have never left me high and dry. And that helps me move a little bit faster. It helps me take action a little bit quicker. And it's still scary. We're going through one of those right now that I will give you a testimony on, hopefully in 6 months or so. But when you're in the heat of it and when you can't see the outcome, like it's just frightening and scary. But the great thing is that God will not let us down. He will never leave us nor forsake us. And when we can really lean into that, it makes it a little bit easier. We can trust him and do that. So anyway, back to your original question. I don't know exactly what it was for us, but I would guess, remembering how I was at that point, it was probably within a day or two. It took a little while for it to sink in. And we had seen God do some things before. So there's also a sense of excitement. Like, this is a big thing. And I just think he's going to do something big through this if we are willing to kind of make the sacrifice and obey in this.
So what types of things, you don't have to go into specifics, but just because I really want people to walk away from this not thinking, well, that was for Bob
Yeah.
and that's not for me, right? So even if I don't hear I should tithe my age, it's just maybe I know I need to tithe. Like this has
Yeah.
been something that I've struggled with back and forth over the years. What if I just trusted and did it? What types of miraculous things happen that you were able to give at that level and still pay your house off within the next 12 months?
Yeah. One of the interesting things about that was probably a year or two after I'd started my business. So I got laid off in 2008. And that was another crazy thing that we just felt like I was getting laid off. I'd been working at a financial firm and I had started this blog in kind of 2007 and was kind of working on it probably 10, 15 hours a week, trying to grow it, all this stuff. And then I get this pink slip saying, all right, your entire department's going to be laid off because we got bought out by another company and all this. And I was naturally just thinking, all right, well, I'm going to go look for another job and figure this out. And as I was doing that, I just sensed the Lord said, no, I want you to work on this blog. And like, this is 2008. No one even knows what a blog is. Like, I literally know like one or two people in the entire universe who are making a living from a blog. And like, this makes no sense. And so I continue. And again, it's like the Lord's there. It's like, nah, I want you to do this. And so then again, I go and talk to Linda and she's on board. And it's like, all right, great. And I don't have much advice
Linda
for when your spouse isn't on board because she's just been amazing. And I know that's a big challenge for a lot of people, but it hasn't been for me. And so we decided, all right, let's go forward with this. We'll use our savings and just try to ramp up into this blog that you've been working on for a year and is making $100 a month. Let's see what can happen. And within 9 months, we were earning more than my old day job from this blog. And like it just doesn't make sense, but that wasn't necessarily an act of generosity on my part, but it was an act of obedience and a really scary one at that. And God came through like that. And, as far as tithing, like we've had multiple instances here. We had one where we were really committed to giving 10%. Like that was a solid number that we wanted to give, when we were first married. And at some point, this is before I got laid off, I went through and we had gotten a raise or something and I had forgot to adjust it. And I kind of realized, oh, we're actually only giving like 8%. And I'm like, all right, I want to get that up to 10, And so I went and ran the numbers. I'm like, oh man, we got a problem here because we're not going to have enough money to pay the bills if we do this, if we actually give 10%. And I'm like, man, all right. And so I go into the Word and I start reading all these verses and I'm like, all right, God, I think that you're saying you want me to do this. And so we decided we were going to give 10% and trust that he was going to provide and for us to be able to do that, even though the math wasn't adding up right then. Which again, like I'm a numbers nerd. Like this is so against the grain for me and so scary.
I completely understand.
Yeah. Like it just doesn't make any sense. And so we decided to do it. And that day, we kind of gave our first, I think we were giving every 2 weeks, at that point. And that day we decided, I walked into the office the next day. Our company had said, we're not giving any raises this year. I walk into the office the next day. My boss calls me into her office. She said, close the door. We need to keep this between you and I. We're not giving raises to anyone else, but I'm giving you a raise right now. Literally the day after we decided to do that. And she gives me a raise and it's more than covers that amount. And I'm just like, all right, I'm done. I'm done. Like I'm in,
Does it make sense at all? Like I am a firm believer in tithing, but I do see that over the years, especially when the income has gone up, we've had those times when we didn't adjust. Yeah. And then when it was like, well, I'm going to go back and just, make it right in my mind. Right.
Yeah.
And then I have to tell my husband what that number is. And there's this back and forth that he's like, I don't know. And I just keep going back to like, I believe though that God will rebuke the devourer. Like we have to do this. A great example for us is when all of this started, this whole pandemic, I already had all these speaking engagements lined up. And so people were saying, we're going to push it out. And one of the companies in particular that I was scheduled to speak at in March, they reached out to me. I'm like, well, hey, if you want to just secure the date for some time in the future, we were at the point where they still were supposed to send the deposit because the contract had been signed. And I'm like, I completely understand. Either way, let me know. I'm excited to work with you all. And, we continue to tithe, do our thing. Do you know, I tithe like every other day. I'm just like that. Like as soon as it comes in, I'm like, let me just send it. Thank goodness for the apps and push pay and all those things, right? But the woman replies to me. She says, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just send you the full amount. And whatever day we choose later this year, 2021, I just trust that you'll be available.
That's awesome.
I'm like, who does that? Right? Like those are the types of things that happen over and over again. And I try to explain to people, it's not because I'm so awesome, so great. I really do believe that I don't tithe for this reason. That's not it. But I do see the results of it in my life every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that heart posture is part of this too, because I always say God's not a genie. He's not like this slot machine that, he's going to allow us to manipulate it. He's no fool, but there are promises here and there are provisions, and these are side effects of obeying and of following through on these things that can't be ignored, and again, it's like if you're chasing money just for money's sake, like you're missing it. But if you're trying to honor the Lord and that's the byproduct of it, like awesome. And it's fun and enjoy it,
Yeah, I do. I love, like you said earlier, the excitement of like, what is God going to do next? Because I always feel like my mind is so blown. I always feel like a little kid excitement about this doesn't even make sense. This 2 + 2 is not supposed to equal 16, this is not logical. True. And yet we experience it over and over again. I just love hearing your story. I have a practical question for you, though. What do you say to the financial folks who say, why would you pay your mortgage off? Now you won't have a write-off. Did people were people saying stuff like that to you?
Oh yeah. My accountant he was fighting me so hard on this. He just did not want me to do it. Mathematically, you're right. You're right. It makes more sense to not do it. But for us, it's more than a math problem. There's a biblical component here. And I just believe that debt is not it's not a sin. There's nowhere in the Bible where it's shown to be a sin, but I just don't think it's what God his best for us. If Jesus came to set the captives free, why would we want to be captives in this area? And so that was just kind of our big motivation. It's if we can be debt free, I want to be 100% debt free. So that was a big part of it. And then the benefit that comes with that, of just not owing anyone, the peace that comes from that, just knowing that, the first time we paid off our car, I remember dancing around that bank with the title in my hand. I was so excited. It's you can't take this from me. You can, just thrilled that I actually owned that car outright. And it was even better and sweeter with the house. Once we got that paid off, just knowing that this is ours, and that taking some comfort in just knowing that the biggest bill I might have right now is our electric bill or something like that. And it's just a really, really nice thing. And that is worth more than some money that could be gained from whatever, the write-offs, or from having that money in the stock market and letting it grow a little bit faster or whatever the thing may be.
Yeah, I'm sure the freedom and the peace, man, is just amazing, because now you truly have the opportunity to chase purpose, not money. I read that you went on a sabbatical some time ago. What was that sabbatical about? How did that come up? Because you were already self-employed, right?
Yeah. So 8 years ago or so, we decided it started with a 1 week. We took a 1 week sabbatical, which is absolutely terrifying, walking away from my business for 1 week. And I decided I wasn't going to check email. And I was terrified that the entire thing was going to come crashing down. I was going to be back and, all right, I got to go find a job again. Anyway, it went completely fine. In the next year, I decided, all right, let's go for a month. And so we took an entire month off. And again, equally as terrified. In fact, I called my assistant at the time weekly to check in and make sure the business hadn't exploded. And after that 1 month, the benefit that I got from a clarity of mind, just being able to step back from the business with a 10,000 foot view and see, all right, where do we actually want to go? Who do I want to be when I grow up? What kind of legacy do we want to leave? I don't want to just have a business just to be churning stuff and just transacting, but I want to be impacting people's lives. And so anyway, so taking that month was so good for that and so refreshing for my soul to have a break. And after we did that, I'm like, I'm going to do this every single year for the rest of my life as long as I possibly can. And so we began doing that every single year. And then in 2017, and this was another kind of crazy story, but long story short, God led us to take an entire year off. So we took the entire 2017 as a sabbatical.
My stomach dropped.
I know.
I read it, but hearing you say it is like a year off.
Mine too. And it was the same thing where, and he had been preparing me for the month-long ones for this thing, because this was never my idea. Like I'm a worker. I tend towards workaholism. Like this is the opposite. Like there's some people who it's like, yeah, I would love to not work for a year. I'm the opposite. Like it's hard. Like when we go on these month-long sabbaticals, by week 2, I cannot wait to get back to work. I'm so excited. And so doing this was a huge act of obedience and just trusting him. But again, like the benefit that came out of this, I mean, it's so much amplified greater than the month-long thing. And with the timing of it all worked out so well. So I had all these plans, all these things we were going to do and courses we were going to launch and collaborations, all these things I kind of planned out for the first half of the year. I would have been incredibly busy. And then what was interesting is we had about 3 months earlier, we had kind of put in our name in a hat to adopt at this one agency. And we had talked to them and they said, all right, here's how we typically work. We'll connect you with a birth mother who's about 3 or 4 months pregnant. So you have a long lead-in time, 5-6 months before the baby's born. So you get to know her and talk to her and blah, 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 all this stuff. Anyway, so we had kind of put our name in the hat and 3 months had gone by and we heard nothing from them at all. But literally it was like 4 or 5 weeks after we had decided, because this one took a little while to sink in and to say, all right, we're going to do this, Lord. We surrender. We're going to take this year off. After we made that decision, it was about 4 weeks later, we get a call from the adoption agency. And they say, we have a special kind of circumstance right now. We have a birth mother who actually gave birth last night, and she has chosen your profile. They basically said, so are you in? And we hung up the phone. We prayed about it for about 10 minutes. They're like, all right, let's drive to Alabama and get our baby girl. And so anyway, like in that, we were so unprepared for that because we were expecting this 6-month kind of lead in. Like we had given away all of our baby clothes. We didn't have a car seat. Like we just completely unprepared. And so in that whole adventure of that next couple months of getting caught up and being able to spend all that time with her was just amazing. And it just couldn't have happened any other way.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. I love how strategic God is, like how intentional, because you were planning this 1 year sabbatical, and then a few months into it, you get your baby girl and you have all this time to spend with her.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I never planned this sabbatical. This was not a forethought thing. It was thrown on me, but yeah, just once we got into it, just 4 weeks into it, then this happens, which was completely unexpected. We were expecting that to happen at the end of the year, which it wasn't in our plans, but God's plans are so much better and so much smarter. So
logistically, how does this even work, Bob? So you plan this, again, you get thrown into,
yeah.
You're called into a 1 year sabbatical, but your business is still out there. Did you just completely disappear, or did you have an arsenal of things and people in place to just create the perception that you were still around?
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a pretty thorough article on it, probably 3,000 or 4,000 words explaining some of that. But the gist was I was blessed to be able to have an assistant who was able to keep things afloat so that the whole business didn't crash and burn. But in terms of content creation, it's like is very much an autopilot. We refreshed a lot of content that we had used in the past. I mean, a lot of our content's evergreen. And so some of the articles I'd written a few years earlier, we just kind of republished them. We sent out emails that were pretty simple, just highlighting something that was kind of republished. As far as email, I put an autoresponder on and basically said, I'm gone for the year.
What were the responses? I'm curious. So were people replying like, are you joking? Is this a joke? Or what was the response from people that you worked with.
Yeah, my assistant handled most of them, so I should probably ask her because I honestly didn't check them much. But here's the thing I've noticed, though, is that the term sabbatical carries a level of importance and weightiness that is so much different than vacation. And so people are very understanding and very kind about it in general. Anytime I've had the word sabbatical in the email autoresponder. So I don't remember it getting any negative kickback on that. And pretty much the autoresponder said, here's the deal. I'm gone for the year. You can talk to my assistant. She can probably help you with a lot of things, or email me again next year and we'll chat. I know, crazy.
But you had the ability to do that. I think the reason that most people will hear that and go, oh, I could never, is because they haven't been setting themselves up to do that, right? Because like you said, we, especially as entrepreneurs, you always feel like you always have to be launching the thing or coming up with something new, or everything is content. And there's a constant game, I feel like, to just churn things out. And you're saying it's possible to take a step back and not have that daily pressure to do that. And many of us just don't set our lives up to do that, to make it a reality.
Yeah. And to be honest, I know how insane this is. Like, I just happen to have walked through this path. This is where he led me. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of my life, I had a hard time just not working one day a week and actually taking a Sabbath day, which I know many people do. Like, I know there are tons of people who I cannot imagine not checking email for one day. And that is a big, bold step of faith for someone listening who needs to do that. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. It's like, we're all on this journey. And we're at different points in the journey, and God's calling different people to do different things at different times. But yeah, that would be my encouragement. It's like, start somewhere, like start taking a break, taking a Sabbath, like actually learning and understanding what the Sabbath means and how it's for our benefit. Jesus said, man is not made for Sabbath, but the Sabbath is for man. There's a biblical principle here, and there's just something really powerful that we have just really enjoyed. The more and more we get to just understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, I love that you said start where you are. Like, start, if you could put do not disturb on your phone for 5 hours a day and not be interrupted, I think that's an act of self-love, right? Like, Absolutely. That's an act of starting to just embrace boundaries and give yourself those guardrails to not allow every little distraction, just every little thing to consume you all day long.
Exactly.
I hear a year and I freak out. I read it, I heard it, and my stomach still dropped. I'm like, I just don't understand. And I'm like you, I can only vacation for so long.
Yeah.
I can get in a good 10-day vacation because the first 3 days I probably was still thinking about work. So I didn't really hit vacation in my mind until day 4. Yeah. Then I can get in a rhythm. But about day 9, I'm like, we should be going back home. I have things to do, especially because when I am relaxed, I have even more downloads, things like, aha moments. And now I want to go home and draw it all out and plan it all out. So let's talk about, you are hardcore on money stuff, right? On your site. And I know you have a course called Real Money Budgeting. How did budgeting also prepare you for the sabbatical, to pay the house off, to do all of these things that you've been able to accomplish?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think that from a practical standpoint, it is the most important thing that we did. Everybody knows that you need a budget. Every financial expert, you're hard pressed to find some who doesn't suggest having a budget. You can look up 100 articles about making forward financial progress. Almost all of them will say that. And it's just true. Whether you call it a budget or a spending plan or whatever, how you rename it, it's being able to define where your money is going. And I like to call it, I read this quote that said, think about budgeting like a lifestyle design blueprint. I'm like, that is so good. So good. Like, if you think about budgeting as a way of designing the life that you want to be, or where you want to be and how you want to live, it reframes it, at least it did for us. And so as a result, we started moving down this path of how do we create a budget that isn't just always telling us no, but actually builds in room for all the things that are really important to us. So if that's and going out to coffee every Saturday morning. That's important to us. And so we got that into the budget, and therefore it's not a struggle and a fight. And giving was a really big thing for us, like we talked about. So that needed to be in the budget. And honestly, that made giving so much more fun, like getting that forefront in the budget, because now it's sitting there. It feels like it's someone else's money because it's in its own account, And so that budgeting kind of component was just a critical piece of our kind of success in all of these different things. Because had we not been doing that, the money, when it's sitting in one big bucket, like it's all fighting against each other, and there's this tension between all these different areas to spend. Like, should I give a gift here or should I buy groceries? And now you have to like figure this out and wrestle with this. And when they're delegated out into different buckets, it just feels a whole lot different. It doesn't make sense why it feels so much different, but it just does when anybody who's budgeted with a good system anyway, like knows that feeling. And so anyway, that's what we set out to kind of do in this course is how do we come up with a method that is easy to stick with, that is, because we tried so many methods. We tried probably 7 or 8 different methods and we failed with them all, which was very humbling for me because I'm like a numbers nerd and this financial guy and I'm failing at budgeting left and right. And so we finally developed a system that, and this was just for ourselves. We never intended to create a course, but it worked so well. And then we like shared it with someone and whatever, she saved like $800 her first month just by doing it. It's like, all right, well, I guess it works. Let's turn it into a course. And so it's been really, really fun. And we've, had a lot of success with it.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about too refers to that. It's like a financial psychology concept around mental accounting. Mm-hmm. And it's not wise to try to compartmentalize just in your head. So when people have money in a bucket and it's all in a bucket and there's no separation of what goes where and what's allocated to what, it is so easy to get confused, to lose track, to get it all tangled. It is really important for just think of the clutter that we all deal with on a daily basis. How in the world, I don't remember what I wore yesterday. So there's no way for me to remember a purchase on Monday, that I forget is taking away from something else. I love this concept. Do you, in this version of budgeting, are you also suggesting having like multiple accounts for different things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's part of the way we do it. Because we struggled with all the software, like we tried every software out there, like, cause again, running a personal finance blog is like, I'm reviewing everything. And so, Hey, Linda, we're going to try this new thing. She's like, and so we would go through all these things. And, that's ultimately what we stumbled on is what if we could use our own bank, so we don't have to have any software involved. And like cash envelopes was not something, again, we tried that, but it's like, this is 21st century. Like it's hard to do everything with cash. We didn't like that. And so we found a way to use our own bank and basically create multiple accounts at our bank and budget according using that. And so it has all this accountability because you're dealing with real money. It's not just numbers on a screen like a lot of software provide. And so it's worked so well for us. So it's really simple, but it's been life-changing for us and for a lot of our students.
Well, that's the thing. It should be simple. Over all these years, I think one of the questions that's gotten on my nerve, I'm going to be honest, there are people like, which budgeting software should I use? I'm like, the one that works for you.
Yes, exactly.
Like, it has to be connected to your lifestyle, like the way that you understand, the way, like we're all different. It's not a one size fits all thing at all. And so you have to be diligent. You can't try one thing and they'll go, well, that doesn't work. So I'm just going to throw the whole idea of budgeting away.
Yep.
You got to keep trying.
Yeah. And there's a ton of people right now who are still doing cash envelope budgeting. And it's like, yeah, by all means, if that works, like that's so simple. And if that works for you, like go for it and run with it. And I know that there are plenty of people using software and making it work, but just for us, it just didn't work. Like, I don't know why. There was something about the lack of accountability, but so that's, why we kind of started using the method that we use.
Well, I have to co-sign on this. So I am completely with you because that used to be, before I start telling people you got to figure it out for yourself, that was a real strain for me, knowing that, through and through, I loved personal finance. I loved talking about it, but I struggled with finding things that worked for me. Yeah. Because I was like really old school, write it down. I'm still a very write it down type of person. And so I've found some apps over time, like there's a few apps that have helped a bit more, but those first like several years, I felt ashamed to tell people that I couldn't master a budget on this app because it was like the app that all the finance people were talking about. And I'm like, what is wrong with me?
I know, right?
But I actually use my accounts. And I remember when I was going to the bank to set up several accounts and the woman was like, what are you doing with all these accounts? I'm like, this is how I have to see it. When it comes in, that's why I told you too, I tithe immediately. So when you look at my, transaction history or whatever with my church, you'll see like multiple, payments or whatever offerings, like every other day, like each month has a bunch of them, right? Because that's just how my brain works. And I have to see it and I have to go, okay, this percentage goes towards household spending. This percentage goes towards this. This percentage goes towards our saving, our goals, or this or that. And I do that like twice a week at least. And people think I'm crazy that do know, because I don't really talk about budgeting much anymore, which is why I was excited to have you on. But you have to find the thing that works for you. And you got to make it easy for you, because the most important thing is that you stick to it. It means nothing to connect the accounts and set it all up and then never consult the budget before you make a purchase. That means nothing.
Well, yeah. And I think a lot of people think that's what budgeting is. It's like, all right, I just downloaded a spreadsheet. I put some numbers in. It's like, all right, that's how I want to spend my money. It's like, well, great. That's how you want to spend it. But what are you doing to stay accountable to actually spending it that way? So. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. I love it. Okay. Well, before I let you go, Bob, got to ask you a few redefining wealth rapid wisdom questions. So you just got to tell us the first thing that comes to mind. The first one is, how do you define success?
Oh, man, this is not a rapid question. But for me, it is consistently obeying the Lord quickly. Let's say that.
That's good. Because you already know there's so much on the other side of that obedience. It's already done. Oh, I love that. Okay. How do you define wealth in 3 words or less?
Freedom to give. How about that?
That's good. What's one book that has redefined how you see wealth?
Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn.
I haven't read that. Treasure Principle. We will link to that in the show notes. Okay.
Good book.
And fill in the blank. My name is, and for me, the truth about wealth is.
My name is Bob, and the truth about wealth is that we are blessed to be a blessing.
Yes. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Bob. I enjoyed this conversation. I am truly inspired. And I know I started out the episode by saying, when I saw the content around you selling off your house or paying off your house, I sent it to my husband. And the reason that I did was not to copy you. It was because I was in my prayer closet and had this download about 7-8 months ago now. And like you said, it wasn't like audible, but I felt it strongly.
Yeah.
I felt the Lord say, pay off your house by December 30th, 2025.
Yeah.
It just strongly, right? Yeah. And I'm like, but I have investment properties that are less that I should do first, right? And luckily my word, that was obedience. So I'm like, okay, don't debate. Don't go back and forth. And when I saw you and your wife talking about it, it was like confirmation. And I literally was scrolling in the middle of the night and just stopped and listened because it was a video.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. Literally, I think it was less than 24 hours I saw that video because I was still in a little bit of resistance. Not resistance, but I was like, what do you mean? Right? Because the numbers, what I'm thinking is, I wanted to give my opinion instead of being obedient. And I shared that with my husband and he said, let's go. Let's do it. Whatever it takes, let's make it happen. And so I want to thank you for your obedience in sharing that, because I know it's obviously not from some type of place of boasting or pride or it's none of those things. But that's why I was so excited about having you on, because when you really can see someone who you can touch and who is relatable and, who is an everyday person like you are, that it's possible.
Yeah.
You know that it's possible. And even the sabbatical, you got me want to take a 2-week, not ready for a month, but a 2-week.
Go for it. Go for it.
But I'm really grateful for your example.
Well,
And the way
I
you and your
appreciate
wife work together.
Yeah. Like, cause anybody who knows me knows that this is a shining example of God using the foolish things to confound the wise. Like I'm just, as normal of a guy as you can be. And I'm telling some of these kind of incredible stories. And I'm just like, oh, wait, I went through that? Like, and again, it has nothing to do with me. It's just simple fact of God led me to do it. And it's like, I said yes-ish, like, so that's what he does. That's what's so cool is that he takes really common things and does supernatural things. And it's available for all of us, like all of us, that he wants to do these miracles in all of our lives. So that's what I'm excited about.
All right. Did you enjoy this episode? I just love Bob's story. I love this idea of tithing your age. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. You have to come over to the Facebook group. We need to talk about this. What would be possible, right? Could you imagine your life free of the burden of debt? Could you imagine your life being able to give as much as you like, being able to take a sabbatical? I have been so inspired by Bob. There are so many things that I've implemented since doing this. And one of those is we plan on living somewhere else for a few months out of the year every year as we build up to our daughter going to college and being able to live out of the U.S. at least 6 or 7 months out of the year. And inspired by Bob. It was inspired by Bob. And I'm so excited about all the things that my family has been putting in place in order to make that a reality. And if this has sparked something in you, I don't blame you, because reading Bob's blog and following his family on social media has really just been so inspiring. And so definitely go check out seedtime.com. Make sure you let Bob know that you found out about him on Redefining Wealth. And I hope you've enjoyed this series. Again, go back the last couple of weeks, check out those episodes, but look at what's possible when we get intentional and radical about paying off debt, about giving, about being serious about leaving a legacy, getting our money back. Again, this year is not over. It's not canceled. And there is still time to put a plan in place for you to master your money. Until next time, I want you to go live your life's purpose, find fulfillment, and earn more without ever chasing money. Talk to you later.